New Hampshire, June 24th, Goose Pond Road North to Hoyt's Ledges. We are back in New Hampshire with our truck camper and will be camping in the AT parking lot at Goose Pond Road. The weather was forecasted to rain for the next 5 days, and today was no exception. We started our hike together on Goose Pond Road, heading north up to Hoyt's Ledges. We started off on the trail in the rain, and we went through a wetland with tall grass and mud and water on the trail that we had to navigate around. There were several blown-down trees across the trail that was hard to climb over and under. Then the hike got harder than I had expected, with about a 45 degrees incline for over a mile. This was a very nice section of the trail. I had low expectations of this section before we started onto the trail because I had thought that it had no views and would be all in the hardwoods. But no, it was a very nice section when we entered into a nice pine forest. The rain had stopped and it had got cold and windy, and my hands were getting cold. We reached Hoyt's Ledge, and it had great views down to the river, with views that even rivaled the ledges on the Airline Trail in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. We saw a bear. This is our second bear sighting on the trail. Our first bear sighting on the trail was in June 2007 in Vermont. We had come around a corner in the trail, and I was in the lead, and the bear was on the trail in front of me. It looked like a bigger cub. It was on the trail next to a tree with a white blaze on it. I yelled, "Bear!" and it ran into the woods. I had a better view of the bear this time than I had in Vermont, but Dave did not see it this time. I had wished that I could have got a picture of the bear, but it happened so quickly that I could not get my camera out in time. It was so exciting to see a bear this close. It had started to rain again, and it had rained the rest of the way back to the car. Tomorrow, there is even more rain forecasted. I do not understand why, whenever we plan a hiking trip this time of the year, we always get record-breaking heat or lots of rain. June 25th, Goose Pond Road south to 3 Mile Road. This morning was cloudy. It was very wet in the woods from all the rain last night and the past 5 days before our trip. I had dropped Dave off at 3 Mile Road in the town of Handover, and I drove back to Goose Pond Road in the town of Lyme, where we had camped. I headed south on a very muddy trail again. The climb up Moose Mountain was very hard. The trail was brushy in a mostly hardwood forest. The hiking book said that this was due to an ice storm, which had cleared out a lot of the big trees. There were a lot of blowdowns here, which had allowed sunlight to get to the ground and create a lot of underbrush. It was such a wet, cloudy day today, and I had passed a viewpoint with no view due to the haze. Big bummer. I met up with Dave on top of North Peak. Again, no view here. We sat here and ate our lunch on a wet tree log. A group of day hikers had reached us, and they were talking about how they would not reach South Peak today and decided to turn around and head back down. This, of course, made me feel like a more experienced hiker. Later, however, another group of day hikers said that they were doing a 20-mile day hike today, in sneakers and in the thick mud. I reached Moose Mountain Shelter and found a lot of trash in it. There was also what looked like an alternator for a car inside the fire pit. No logbook was in the shelter. There might have been a view from the shelter, but not today. However, at least it is not raining. Just cloudy and damp out, with lots of mud and wet leaves on the ground. I reached South Peak with very little pine trees. A sign here marked the top at an elevation of 2,300 feet. I saw the remnants of an airplane that had crashed into this mountain. The group that was hiking the 20 miles had told me that 2 times an airplane had crashed into this mountain. The most recent one had crashed here in the 1990s. They told me that people had hiked here just to see this crash site. However, now the area is grown in a lot, so it is more difficult to see the wreckage now. The rest of the way out was mostly cloudy and descended uneventful, with just a lot of mosquitoes from the top of South Peak. I had heard a strange bird sound that I had thought was a hawk, and then several sounds of something that sounded like a scream on my way out. June 26th, Dorchester Road north to the Smart Mountain Fire Warden's cabin. It is another hot, humid, cloudy, dead air morning, and the sun is supposed to come out today to make it a more miserable hiking day. We got onto the trail at around 8 o'clock, and it started off very hard. I had forgot what hiking the White Mountains was like. Since we had done Madison Hut, we had been doing small, short day hiking, and we had become soft day hikers. This section was truly white mountain hiking with difficult terrain, and this weather only made it more difficult and miserable. We reached some nice open views and had went into a nice alpine area. However, we could not really enjoy it as the mosquitoes were all over us, just as worst as it was when we had climbed Katahdin Mountain in Maine. The rainy, damp, humid days had created great conditions for mosquitoes to breed in. We reached the Smarts Mountain Ranger Trail. I had not packed enough food for this hike, and I was tempted to just turn around at the Smarts Mountain Ranger Trail. However, it was just a thought, and we continued. We had seen several thru hikers on the trail today. We met a local man who was coming back down before he had reached the summit, because he said that the weather just did not motivate him to continue the climb up. The climb up was difficult after we had passed the Ranger Trail, but we had made it to the summit of Smart Mountain at 3,240 feet. It was a long and hard 3.9-mile climb up from the AT parking lot, and it was very beautiful here as it went through the pine forest. We found a couple of nice tent sites, and the fire tower had a great 360-degree view of the other mountains and the valley below. The old fire warden cabin was very neat. There was no bunk beds in it, and the cabin was not very well kept up. There was a large hole in the floor that would make it easy for the wildlife to get in. There was an old sink that was covered with a board, and it looked like mice had taken residency in it. The tower and cabin were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps with Forest Service funds in 1939 in response to increased forest fire danger in the wake of the Great New England Hurricane of 1938, which blew down over 600,000 acres of trees in New England. The historic structures were active as a fire lookout station from 1939 to 1973. Today, the cabin serves as an overnight shelter for hikers on the Appalachian Trail. It is nice that the Dartmouth Outing Club, the DOC, had saved this for thru hikers. I love the old cabin, and I am happy that it is still here. It is hard to imagine someone staying and watching for fires from the fire tower. We descended back down to the Ranger Trail and took it back down to the parking lot. It was a very steep and slippery descent with water running over rocky ledges and wet moss on it. The mosquitoes were still relentless on the way down. We reached an old dirt road with a garage and an old automobile frame in the woods. This must have been how the ranger got up to the fire tower and cabin. However, it was still a bad climb up from here to the tower and the cabin. June 27th, Grafton Turnpike Road North to Dorchester Road. This is just a 2-mile section of the trail that we need to do. It is the end of our trip, and we are heading home today. I started from the Dartmouth Skiway, and Dave started from the AT parking lot off of Dorchester Road, where we had camped last night in our truck camper. I started up through a grassy section with lots of wildflowers. I hate tall grass because it always has ticks, deer ticks that carry Lyme disease. Lyme disease symptoms can vary widely and may include flu-like symptoms, a characteristic rash, and in more severe cases, neurological or cardiovascular issues. Early symptoms often include fever, fatigue, headache, chills, and a rash called erythema migrans, which can resemble a bullseye. If left untreated, Lyme disease can spread to other parts of the body, potentially affecting the nervous system, heart, and joints, leading to symptoms like joint pain, facial palsy, heart palpitations, and memory problems. Yeah, it is that bad, and that is why I hate tall grassy fields, because this is where you can pick them up. The wildflowers smelled great here. I reached a sign for free water and ice cream. A well-used trail had led to a blue house that was across the street. I continued on the trail and entered a mostly hardwood forest with lots of brush near the trail. It was our first sunny day of this trip and the day that we were heading home. I passed the trail maintainer for this section of the trail, and he was painting white blazes on the trees. He told me that lots of people were getting lost on this section of the trail, where the trail had entered into a nice open pine forest. I reached a nice scenic stream crossing with a ledge overhang, and I wanted to remember the peace of the woods here. I met up with Dave, and later after I drove over to pick him up, he told me that the trail maintainer had told him that a plane did crash into Moose Mountain in the 1940, and in 1980, a Cessna had also crashed into the mountain. That crash must have been what I had seen when I was hiking that section. He said that the maintainer also said that a Boeing 787 had crashed into Smarts Mountain and it had taken 6 years to find it. The maintainer had also told Dave that there were radio-collared bears in the area that would walk right up to the hikers. Some of the bears were being raised by the college so that they could study them in the wild. I think that they should let the thru hikers know this with signage. I could not imagine having a bear coming right up to me in the woods. Dave said that one of the bears had been a cub, and that it must have been the cub that I had seen on the first day of this trip. It was a sunny day today, and we are sad to have to leave the trail and head home.